Roadmaps in ZStream today. So the first thing we're going to do is create some roadmaps and some items that we want to visualize on those roadmaps. Then we're going to create custom fields so that we can visualize different aspects of those items against each other. And finally, we're going to create the actual visual roadmaps with swim lane views and timeline views. So with that in progress, let's get into it. We're going to go to the Roadmaps tab down here in our left nav. And this project has no roadmaps currently, so we're going to create one. And we'll call it First Roadmap and select Q2 2020. Now this date range doesn't matter too much. Your roadmap will adjust as your items change. I'll go ahead and create this. And when we open it up, the first thing we're going to see is an empty list. So here we have no items to show. So we're going to go ahead and create some. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an item. We can also create milestones, but I'll create an item. And maybe we need to migrate our version control to another provider, let's say XYZ provider, for where we're keeping track of all that online. And then maybe we also need to improve our permissions implementation. And that's going to be a long initiative. And then maybe we need to finish some content for some campaign that we're doing for our marketing team. So I'm going to start with just these, and then let's call this goal is going to be a milestone. So let's say release version 3.4.1, and we'll leave this like that for now. So now we're done with the first thing. We created a roadmap and we created some items. But to actually visualize these, we're going to create some fields. So here I'm going to go into my table settings where I can go ahead and hide and show fields in this table. And I can also create new fields. So here I'm going to create a team field. And I'm going to make it a list. And for now, let's say this is for our front-end development team. And maybe this is for our back-end development team. So we're basically going to break down these items by who they belong to in general. And then maybe we'll do it by priority too. So quality assurance team. And then lastly, let's create a marketing team value. Marketing. Awesome. So I'm going to create this. Now it's just another field that I can show in my table. And I can assign some values to these. So this release may not be associated with any specific team. For now, I'm going to say maybe marketing, because our marketing team has to prepare a bunch of content right before this release that we're basically going to show off as part of this release to publicize it. Finishing content for a campaign, also this marketing value. Improving permissions implementation, I'll say that's backend, even though it may be both. And then migrating, I'll say this is also backend. So let's add some tasks for QA and frontend. And this might be like pagination improvements somewhere. Frontend and QA, let's say we want to finish our core automation testing of some components. Great, so now I've assigned these values, and I'm going to go ahead and create another field called priority. And I'm not going to, actually, yeah, I'll add a color for now. Highest high. Oops. Medium, low. So these could be any values that you create, and you can also allow selecting multiple tasks here aren't going to have multiple priorities at once. So I'm not going to check this. I'll leave that unchecked. And I'll create this field as well. and I will show it in my table. So I can scroll over to this. We can also adjust these columns. And priority of core automation testing is very high. Pagination improvements, maybe that's high. Release might be medium. Content might be medium. Permissions might be causing people a lot of trouble, so let's say that's high. And migrating this to our preferred version control manager. Let's say that's medium. Great, and let's create one more field called risk, just to give ourselves some flexibility here in terms of how we visualize this. And let's not call this high, let's call this critical. Medium, for example. Safe. And I actually want to fill in some more values here, so let's say very high is between medium and critical. And maybe low is down here. And we actually want safe to show up as green. So I'm just going to edit this, save it, and now I'm going to create this risk field. And I'll show it as well in my table. Automation testing, that itself, medium risk, pagination improvements, medium risk. This release, depending on how things have been going, what's included in it, what the state of our QA is, it could be high risk, it could be low risk, maybe it's a small release, so let's say low risk for now. Content, so there actually is a risk here if we release some content that potentially really offends someone, or potentially really clashes with kind of our brand values. So I'm going to say that could be a high risk, just for the purpose of this. Improving permissions implementation, that's critical. If we get that wrong, we're going to be exposing data that we shouldn't be exposing. And the risk here could actually be very high as well if something goes wrong with migrating it, if we lose some data there, and lose some intellectual property or code. Great, so now we have our three fields, team, priority, and risk. And I'm going to go ahead and create a view. So here we had been looking at our list view. That's kind of the stock overview of everything. We can go ahead and filter and search by any of these items like we can with tasks. But for now, I'm going to create a view, and this is going to be our first swim lane view. Here I'm going to select one of the fields that we created for the row and one for the column. And let's say the row is team, and we'll look at priority for now. So I've created this view. We can see our priorities across the top and our teams as rows. And we can also go ahead and change these. So here we see team with little kind of row icon, swim lane icon, and we see priority with a little column icon. So if I wanted to change this, I can go ahead and change this and visualize these same items by risk. For now, I'm going to keep it on priority. But I could also change the row to risk. So I can look at risk and priority against each other as well. So any field that we created with list values, we could go ahead and change these. And this is the same as going and editing these fields in our view editor. It's just a little faster. And if we don't need to see some of these columns, we can also go ahead and hide them. For example, if I want to hide medium priority things, I can just hover over this column header, click the little eye icon to hide it, and I can also hide some of these swim lanes as well. So maybe I'll hide backend devs. And once we want to go back and add these, we can add them here, both the rows and the columns. For now, I'll leave it like this. And I'll actually click here to create a new item. And this is some new task or some new initiative. And here I can select is it an item or a milestone. I'll leave it as an item, but you could select milestone as well. I'm just going to hit enter, and we've created this here. And if we open it up in our side pop-up, we're going to see it has these values from where we created it. The team value being QA, and the priority value being low. So we've set that up here. It hasn't added a risk value because there's no way to determine risk from where we added it on this visualization. But we can go ahead and add that ourselves. Whoops. That is strange. That's okay. And then I'm going to close this. And we can drag things around, visualize them where we need to, and basically plan out everything from here. By moving these values, of course, I'm changing the value of both the swim lane value here, so front-end devs, and the priority value. So now it's highest, and it's on our front-end team. So that's how we deal with swim lane views. If we have a lot of values, we can just scroll through these. That's fine. We can also collapse some of these to save some space if we have a lot of values, for example, in QA. Now let's look at how we can show these fields and these items on a timeline view. So I'm going to create first timeline. And here, instead of selecting for a row and a column, I'm going to select fields for a row and an item color. Because the column, this axis, is essentially going to be determined by the date range on the item, because this is a timeline. So here I'll break this down by team, and maybe I want to color the items by risk, so I can visualize that. All right, so I just created my timeline. I can open up all of these items, and because these were created on our list, with Quick Create, we didn't fill out a form giving them a date range. They're given a default date range at the start of our roadmap's date range. And they show as solid colors because they're too small for us to see the data inside them, at least in this month's view. But now I can go ahead and drag them around. I can change the size really easily by just dragging on the ends. When I drag on the ends, I'll see the date range that I'm actually setting it to here. So let's go ahead and set some appropriate dates for these. For example, here. And we can also drag these items between the swim lanes. So if this some new initiative was part of our marketing, oh, it's actually closed, so I can't drag it there. Now I've dragged it into marketing. And then maybe we have our release goal ahead of us here. And we can go ahead and open any of these items and change the date range directly on a date picker, including months and quarters. So if I want to set this to June, I can do that. As well as just dragging them around and changing the date ourselves. So this is how we're going to create a timeline view. We can also come in and just click on our timeline in a swim lane to create an item. And we'll create another new initiative here. And we'll notice that the team field is already filled in as QA because that's where we clicked to create it from. So I can give this a risk, or I could not give it a risk. But for now, I'll assign these. I'll assign myself, and I could add some description here. So I'll create it, we see it show up, and we can go ahead and edit everything that's going on here. That's how we're going to visualize things. If we want to come up and change the fields we're using to visualize them, we can do that here as well. I can change the swim lane to priority just like I did with our swim lane view. And I can change the color that we're displaying these by as well to be priority. So here it's yellow and red, and this is showing risk. I can change that to priority. And that is about it. We can also change and look at the date. So here we have today, and here's an item that we still haven't adjusted. And then we can look at the quarter view a little farther out. Our items become small, but we can see tooltips. And we can look at months, so maybe we're planning the next few months. And we can also look at weeks. So here I have kind of a more granular view of everything I'm looking at. All right, that's about it. Again, we have our list view where we created some items and created some fields. Swim lane views where we're visualizing buckets against each other. And then timeline views where we're visualizing some field against the date ranges set up for these items. So we could go ahead and create another timeline view if we wanted to. We could select another row, we could visualize things by priority or risk, and we can create as many views as we need, maybe for risk assessment, for our general outlook for our teams in the next few months. We can create a bunch of different views and slice and dice by all the fields that we've created on this list view. And again, the list view is where we're going to create these fields. We can show and hide them, and we can also come back and edit them here as well. So we can edit our risk values, or we could go ahead and delete that field. And with that, I think we're done learning how to create a roadmap. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.